All right, Ruth chapter 2. Ruth chapter 2. How much did we study last week? A lot. And I enjoyed that. I don't know if you have. This is an amazing book, and there's so much that I pull out of this book. Every time I read it, I get something new. So I'm trying to do it justice, but I'm also trying to do my best to give you what it says there, because we just read over things sometimes without studying it. And when we go back and read it again and again and again, we get more out of it. And I just keep getting more out of it. Man, I'm excited because every time I read it, I get more out of it. So what did we see last time? Last time, what we saw was, we saw all about, chapter 1 was all about family, famine, and funerals. Basically, that's what chapter 1 was about. We looked at these people, Elimelech and Naomi, and their two kids, Mahlon and Chilion. And we saw who they were, and we saw that they were from Judah, and they went to Moab, even though they shouldn't have. And we saw that the kids got married, but I didn't tell you last week who married who, because it doesn't say in the text. So my thought this week, well, who did she marry and who did she marry? And you know what? It doesn't say. If we go by the order in the text, what did it say there in chapter 1? It says, and took them wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other was Ruth. So did Orpah marry the first one and Ruth the second one? Well, so I went to Jewish tradition, and Jewish tradition says, no, she married him and she married him. So I don't know. Can we trust that? I don't know. But I had that thought, who married who? So as I had that thought, I thought, well, who was their daddy? All right? Because the book of Ruth tells us, and we're going to get into this, and it's going to shock you, the daddy of Boaz. So who was their daddy? And so I looked into that, and according to Jewish tradition, Ruth and Orpah were the daughters of King Eglon of Moab. Now, is this true or not? You know, Jewish tradition, they're usually pretty good with their tradition of sticking with the truth. But, you know, sometimes it could be that tradition isn't true. It's just something that people made up. So I'm not teaching dogmatically that he was, but I am asking, well, the Jews say it was this King Eglon. Now, do you know the story of King Eglon? Let's go there. Let's go to Judges chapter 3. And this is taking place during the time of the Judges. All right? So it's fun to go back and read the book of Judges. Now, if this tradition is true, this is the daddy of Ruth. Or maybe granddaddy. I don't know exactly. But I don't know about this guy being your dad. You talk about... This guy was something else. This is one of the most wildest stories in the whole Bible. And it's just, okay, let's go there. Judges chapter 3. Judges chapter 3, starting in verse 12. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, right? They went into the place of Moab, the country of Moab, against Israel because they had done evil in the sight of the Lord. And he gathered unto him the children of Ammon and Amalek, and went and smote Israel and possessed the city of palm trees. So the children of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. Not a good number, right? But when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord raised them up a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, a Benjaminite, a man left-handed, and by him the children of Israel sent a present unto Eglon, the king of Moab. But Ehud made him a dagger which had 2 edges of a cubit length. A cubit is 18 inches. And he did gird it under his raiment upon his right thigh. Now, why is this important? Well, we're right-handed. We put it on our left side. He's left-handed, so he put it on his right side. Now, maybe that's how he gets away and he gets through the TSA without being checked, because he's backwards than what most people do, okay? So it says here, he made him a dagger, what was 2 edges of a cubit length, and he did gird it under his raiment upon his right thigh. And he brought the present unto Eglon, king of Moab, and Eglon was a very fat man. Now, imagine if you're in the Bible and you're remembered as being a very fat man. That's just, oh, okay. And maybe he had a gland problem, right? But anyway, he says, and he brought the present unto Eglon, king of Moab, and Eglon was a very fat man. And when he had made an end to offer the present, he sent away the people that bare the present But he himself turned again from the quarries that were by Gilgal and said, I have a secret errand unto thee, O king, who said, keep peace, or keep silence. And all that stood by him went out from him, and Ehud came into him, and he was sitting in a summer parlor, which he had for himself alone. And Ehud said, I have a message from God unto thee, and he arose out of his seat. And Ehud put forth his left hand, and took the dagger from his right thigh, and thrust it into his belly. Now, you ain't seen nothing yet. Watch what happens next. And the haft, which would be the hilt, also went in after the blade, and the fat closed upon the blade, so that he could not draw the dagger out of his belly, and the dirt came out. Uh-oh. What is that? Well, he's cutting into the intestines, and there's some fecal matter or something. It just kind of sounds gross. Then Ehud went forth through the porch, and shut the doors of the parlor upon him, and locked them. When he was gone out, his servants came, and when they saw that, behold, the doors of the parlor were locked, they said, surely he covereth his feet in his summer chamber. And they tarried till they were ashamed. And behold, he opened not the doors of the parlor. Therefore they took a key and opened them. And behold, their Lord was fallen down dead on the earth. And Ehud escaped while they tarried, and passed beyond the quarries, and escaped into Serath. And it came to pass when he was come, that he blew a trumpet in the mountain of Ephraim. And the children of Israel went down with him from the mount, and he before them. And he said unto them, follow after me, for the Lord hath delivered your enemies, the Moabites, into your hand. And they went down after him, and took the fords of Jordan toward Moab, and suffered not a man to pass over. And they slew of Moab at that time about 10,000 men, all lusty and all men of valor, and there escaped not a man. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest 80 years. Okay? So this is taking place during this time. So why would he take his wife to a place like that? That doesn't really make a lot of sense. So was this after that guy died? But if this tradition is true, this Jewish tradition, then what does that mean? That means that these two are what? The daughters of a king, if that tradition is right. And their daddy was a fat fella. Imagine being that fat that you have an 18-inch dagger, and you push that in a guy, and you can't pull it back out because it got lost up in the fat somewhere. That must have, I don't know what my girth is, but can you imagine 18 inches? That guy must have been really, really fat. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I'm not teaching it as dogmatic. I'm just saying that's what the Jewish tradition said, is that they came from that king. So remember, she marries into the lineage of what became King David. So what does that mean? That means King David is the king of Israel, but he also has blood from the king of the Moabites. So, you would think that the Moabites would have submitted to King David. Anyway, it's fascinating to see all this, and we're going to see even more. So the book of Ruth is more than just a love story. It's a book about royalty and how these royal houses, they did this, they did that. So I don't know. Again, I try not to follow tradition, but I just found that fascinating that they say, the Jews, that traditionally we think Ruth came from King Eglon, the fat man. So when Ruth and Orpah were told by Naomi to go back to their country, what would she tell them to go back to? If that was, then their dad was dead, and there was turmoil, and Israel just defeated Moab, so there really wasn't much more to go back to, okay? Except their own people that were left in their own language. But, thank God, Ruth said, no, I'm going to go where the true God is of Israel. So she was converted. But I wanted to show you just what's really going on, and that just even more makes me think, why on earth did they go there? Why would they go to a place like this? Were they carpetbaggers? You know what that term is? We know what that is down south, don't we? After a war, people come in after the war and buy up everything and try to get rich. I don't know. I have no idea, but I found that fascinating just to kind of throw in a little bit more context into the book. So, but I found it awesome as well. That means King David was king of Israel, but also he should be king of Moab as well. Isn't that fascinating? All right, so chapter 2 of Ruth, chapter 2 of the book of Ruth. And it says in verse 1, and Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth, of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Well, if she had family that was wealthy, then why did he leave? Remember, there was a famine, and they were in Bethlehem, which means house of bread, and they had a rich family. So why did they leave to go over there to lose everything, and she came back dirt poor. Was he a missionary? Maybe he's like, I'm going to be a missionary to the Moabites, and maybe that's why he went over there. I don't know, but I'm just looking at this from all angles, and I'm just saying, how interesting that she comes back and her family's wealthy. That doesn't make sense. You would think then Elimelech would have been wealthy. And you know what we're about to find out? We're about to find out something very interesting. This family that was wealthy is wealthy because guess what they are? Royalty as well. We're about to figure it out because remember, they were from Judah. Where does David come from? He's the lion of the king of Judah, of the tribe of Judah. So he's kind of like a part of royalty, as we will see here in a moment. So I want to get into that. But it introduces us to Boaz. The word Boaz means strength. Strength. Which is interesting. So he's a very strong man. And we see that. He's a very rich man, very powerful man, but also very strong. And what is the story all about? It's Ruth finding a husband. And what a wonderful thing that she finds a very strong husband that can provide for her. So Boaz is also a type of Christ. And Christ is strong. He's powerful. He's amazing. So there's just so many ways to look at this book. So you see in verse 1, and Naomi had a kinsman of her husband's, a mighty man of wealth of the family of Elimelech, and his name was Boaz. Now, should we? Yeah, I guess we should. Let's look now at Boaz. If you go to chapter 4, the very end of Ruth, I told you this before, it gives the lineage from Judah and Judah's son Pharez, verse 18 of chapter 4. And you remember the story, Pharez was the bastard son of Judah. Okay, remember that? And the Bible says a bastard is not to come into the congregation until the 10th generation. And you just happen to count them all down, and guess what? David was the 10th. So David was the 10th one. Now God will take him back, and David was the king. King of Israel, but also he had a lineage to the king of Moab, which is like double king, I guess you can say. But what's fascinating is who it says is Boaz's father. So here, Boaz's father was Salmon, which would be Solomon, Nason was his father, and Amminadab was his father. Now, have you ever heard the name Amminadab before? If you haven't, you should. That's a pretty important dude in the Bible, Amminadab. So this is taking place in the time of the Judges, and the time of the Judges is a couple hundred years after the time that Israel came out of Egypt and the 40 years in the wilderness, and they came in and took over the land. Now, who was it that was the captain of the Lord's host that took over the land? You should know this one. Joshua. So Joshua and Moses, Moses died. Because of Moses' sin, God wouldn't let Moses into the promise. So Joshua comes in. Now, Song of Solomon, chapter 6, verse 10 through 12. Very quickly, look what it says about this Amminadab guy. Okay, I told you there's so much in this book, but I want you to see what's going on here. This isn't just some book that someone says, oh, I'm going to write a love story. There's all these people that were all royalty, and it's a story about a king, is what this book is about. How we got King David, who's a type of Christ. So we go to Song of Solomon, and Song of Solomon, chapter 6. And there it talks about Amminadab. And did you know Amminadab was a mighty man of war? And here in Song of Solomon, chapter 6, sometimes my pages stick together, I think. Chapter 6, verse 10. Who is she that looketh forth as the morning, fair as the moon, clear as the sun, and terrible as an army with banners? So the context here is an army, but it's a woman. And it continues there, but look at verse 12. Or ever I was aware, my soul made me like the chariots of Amminadab. The chariots of Amminadab. So Amminadab was a warrior, he was a fighter, and he had chariots. Let's look at the next verse. Go back to Numbers chapter 2. The chariots of Amminadab. I mean, you have to be what would you call him but like a general, right? And he had all these chariots and everything. Why is he such an important dude? Why is he so important? Well, Numbers chapter 3 and verse 2. And it says, and these are the names of the sons of Aaron, Nadab, the firstborn, and Abihu. Wait, is it 3:2 or 2:3? What was the verse here? These stupid glasses make it hard for me to see. 3:2. Was it 2:3? It might be 2:3 is what I wanted there. Yeah. Okay, so 2:3. So yeah, Numbers 2:3, excuse me, 2:3. And on the east side toward the rising of the sun shall they of the standard of the camp of Judah pitch throughout their armies, and Nason, the son of Amminadab, shall be captain of the children of Judah. Do you get that right there? So this guy, he was somebody that fought with Joshua, and he had a son who was a captain in the military. So general, captain, I guess. But look at what it says in 1 Chronicles 2:10. Okay, this is all coming together. I'm sorry it's taking so long. But 1 Chronicles chapter 2 and verse 10. This is why we read our Bible, to find little nuggets like this. And it says 1 Chronicles 2:10. And Ram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nason, prince of the children of Judah. So that means that this guy was a captain and a prince. Isn't that? Well, what is a prince? What comes from a prince? Well, eventually a prince becomes a king. So do you see how this thing is? Wow, this is two privileged people coming together. That's what the whole story is about. And they needed to check their Jewish privilege and their Moabite privilege, didn't they? But that's what this is about. She could have been the son of a king, and this guy is the son of a prince. And eventually, his lineage goes from a prince to a king, King David. Are you all with me? So does this really open this book up to you? No wonder this is in the Bible. This isn't just two people that got together that fell on bad times. This is kings and princes and royalty. This is Princess Diana of the day, if you will, is what Ruth was. All right? So with that stated, let's go back to Ruth. And it's just, to me, it's fascinating. And this is why we read the Bible, to see all these stories. But it's all prophetic too, because it ties into the prophecy to David as well. So back here in, I forgot to go to Matthew, didn't I? All right, let's go to Matthew chapter 1. Forgot to go to Matthew. Continue here. Look at Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. I'm all over the place today because I did all my notes, and then I look in my Bible and I had more notes that I forgot about. So I'm going back and forth to my Bible notes and my notes that I did in my own study. But Matthew chapter 1, look at verse 1 through 5. The book of the generation of Jesus. No, this is, oh man, okay. This is going to blow your mind. Are you ready for this? Are you ready for your mind to be blown? This blew my mind because I'm just like, first of all, we see the bastard child, Pharez. And you know, that's like, oh, shocking. Well, now, guess what? Guess what's in the lineage? A prostitute. Now, who is Boaz's parents? All right, Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 through 5. The book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham begat Isaac, Isaac begat Jacob, and Jacob begat Judas, which is Judah, and his brethren. All right, remember, they're from the tribe of Judah. And Judas begot Pharez and Zerah of Tamar, who was what? Who was the woman that was promised the child to marry, but he reneged on his promise, and so she played the harlot, and she got pregnant. So that produced a bastard child, Pharez and Zerah. They were twins. And Pharez begot Ezram, and Ezram begot Aram. And Aram begot Amminadab, and Amminadab begot Nason, and Nason begot Salmon. And Salmon begot Boaz, now look at those two next words, of Rechab. And Boaz begot Obed of Ruth, and Obed begot. Do you know who Boaz's mother is? Rahab the harlot. Do you know that story in Jericho? Joshua fought the battle of Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. Remember that? So you remember that song. So you can go to, and Brother Mark's here with me, who went to Israel with me. We didn't get to go. I hope in this trip we get to go and see Jericho. Because they have unearthed Jericho. And remember they walked around it, was it For several days they walked around at one time, and then it was what, 7 times? It was something like 13 times. I can't remember. But the last time they walked around Jericho, the walls fell, except for one place. The spies came in, and that woman, Rahab, or Rachab, however you want to say her name, protected the spies, and she let them down from the wall, and they said, well, God bless you. Well, Joshua walks around there. Everything falls except that one place where she lived. And they say you can go there, and I hope we can, and see that one wall still standing compared to everything else that fell. It's still a testimony today. So this guy, Salmon, got to be buddy-buddy with Rachab and says, hey, will you marry me? So he marries the prostitute Rachab. Well, of course, she got converted, I guess you could say. But did you know that? Did you know that she was in the lineage of this guy? That's just, wow, that blew my mind when I saw that in the Bible. I was like, what? I was like, that's pretty amazing. So even though the moral of that story is you might come from a dysfunctional family, or there might be skeletons in the closet, if you will, God can still, when you get converted, do something good with you. Right? But would you, when you study your family history, do you find things you don't want to know about? But yet it's in the Bible. But now do you know why the book of Rahab, the story of Rahab is in the Bible? Because it's all tying into David. Everything goes to David because David is a type of Christ. So everything really is going to Jesus. The whole Bible's about Jesus and how he came and everything else. So that was fascinating. All right, back to Ruth chapter 1. I was just like, wow, that's pretty cool. All right, so verse 1 tells us that Boaz is a wealthy man. It says he's a mighty man of wealth. Why? Because he's really a prince of Israel. Do you see that? Because of his grandpa being a prince of Israel. So that's where his wealth came from. Okay? So then verse 2, and Ruth the Moabitess said unto Naomi, let me now go to the field and glean ears of corn after him in whom sight I shall find grace. And she said unto her, go, my daughter. Now, it doesn't say here that Ruth knew who Boaz was. All we know is that Ruth wanted to get married, wanted a husband. And so she just goes out and starts working because why? Well, if you'll remember what we looked at last week, there was a field. And it says in Leviticus 19, 9 through 10, that the poor would come to the field and get the corners for them. Remember, Naomi and Ruth came back dirt poor. They had nothing. So she says, well, I guess I'm going to go out in the field and start getting some food because we're hungry. Now, her thought was maybe I'll meet somebody. And maybe that's what Naomi's thought was too. Well, maybe she'll meet somebody and maybe they'll get married. So she's just like, well, I got to do something, I got to eat. So she goes out and she starts doing this. And we see that. Ruth seeks to work in front of a man to catch his eye or to be seen of him because she's looking for a husband. Why? To provide for her. So she's going to work and she's hoping maybe if I work hard enough, I'll be seen and somebody will marry me. Right? I mean, let's just say it the way it is, okay? And so here we go, verse 3. And she went and came and gleaned in the field after the reapers, and her hap, today we have a word, we call it happenstance. Her hap was to light on a part of the field belonging unto Boaz, which was of the kindred of Elimelech. Now wait a minute, that can't be just a coincidence. Of all the fields she could have gone to work in, it happened to be this guy's, who was from the family of her husband's father. Okay? So, father-in-law, I guess that would be. So, is that just an accident? Probably not. And behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem and said unto the reapers, the Lord be with you. And they answered him, the Lord bless thee. Okay, so do you see what's going on here? There are people that are working for Boaz. He's like a prince of Israel. So he's got all these people working for him. And they're called the reapers. And the reapers are out in this field cutting all the corn or barley or whatever, while over here, there's the poor that are working. We would call these the hired help, right? Well, she's not a hired help. She's just somebody that's poor is trying to eat, so she's going over there, but she's seeing these guys over here, all right? Now, we find out there was the hired help, but we also find out that Boaz had some maidens. And I guess the maidens, what do you think they did? Well, they might have come out there too and cut with the reapers and helped them, but usually they're the ones bringing the water and stuff like this maybe. I don't know. All I know is this is the cast of characters, if you will. These are the people that are there. So, the first thing we see about Boaz is that he was a religious man. The first thing he says is in verse 4, and he goes to say to those reapers, he says, "The Lord be with you." And they answered him, "The Lord bless thee." So, he's well, you can't say he's a Christian man, but that's how we would spiritually apply to it. He was the guy that's like, "Hey, God bless you guys. What you doing?" "Oh, Lord bless you too." So he sounds like a very nice religious fella. And of course, that's what he is. But it says in verse 3, he is of the kindred of Elimelech. All right. So verse 4, again, it says he came from Bethlehem. Boaz is from Bethlehem. Who else is from Bethlehem? David and Christ. The first mention in the Bible of Bethlehem is in Genesis 35:19, where somebody dies. Did you know that? That's in the Old Testament. The first mention in the New Testament of Bethlehem is Matthew 2:1, and it has to do with life. Is there anything to that? I don't know. By the way, the King Eglon, there's so much in my head right now because I studied all this. That word Eglon shows up, guess how many times in the Bible? 13. and he ruled for 18 years, 6 plus 6 plus 6. 13. So Moab is evil, but yet God took somebody that was a king of evil and was able to bring their lineage into the lineage over here. So anyway, that's just, there's so much going on here. This book is just so deep for such a small book. So verse 5, then Boaz said unto his servant that was set over the reapers, "Whose damsel is this?" So he's out in the field. All he should be thinking about is, how much am I going to make this year? Because I got to get the cotton in, you know. And he's got all these guys working. And yet he comes out and goes, "God bless you, God bless you." Who's that girl over there? Do you see what's going on here? It's like high school all over again. Hey, what's her name? Ooh, she's pretty. Yeah. So when you read this, that's why I call it a love story, because there's so much going on here. It's hilarious, okay? So he's like, "So who's that lady?" And the servant, verse 6, that was set over the reapers answered and said, "It is the Moabitess damsel that came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab." Now, he asks, "Who is she?" No, he didn't ask, "Who is she?" I'm sorry. He asked, verse 5, "Whose damsel is this?" He asked, "Who does she belong to?" So he's not asking, "Hey, who is she?" He's asking, "Hey, is she married?" "Hey, is she single?" Do you ever hear people, "No, we don't do that today." You don't get together with your friends when you're single and go, "Hey, is that girl got a boyfriend?" "No? Oh, let me go talk to her." See what's going on here? So then Boaz said unto his servant that was set over the reapers, "Whose damsel is this?" What a weird thing to ask. Is, who does she belong to, basically? And I think that's because he wanted to know, because he might have wanted to be interested in her, right? He's asking if she's married. Now, she must have been pretty, right? But there's two kinds of pretty. There's inward and outward. A lot of guys fall in love with what they see outwardly. You need to check what's inside first, because that's true beauty, the inner beauty, if you will. And I think Boaz sees a lot of inner beauty in her, which is, a moral, loving, caring person. Verse 5. So Boaz says, "Whose damsel is this?" The servant that was set over the reapers answered and said, he could have said, "Oh, she is with Naomi, and, and she's not married." That would have been the right answer. But no, he says, "It's the Moabitess damsel." You see that? Oh, that's the Moabite woman. That's the first thing he throws out there. Isn't that kind of funny? Okay, but anyway, that's kind of odd. It's, "Oh, you mean that Moabite?" Kind of like, almost like dissing her or putting her down. "Oh, that's the Moabite woman over there." And they came back with Naomi out of the country of Moab. Now, he should have said, "Oh, that's Ruth. She's single." That would have been better. But no, he had to point out that she... So it sounded like he didn't want to have anything to do with her, because she's one of those Moabites. Do you see how that... All right, so verse 7. And she said, now wait a minute, you would think this would be a private conversation. Hey, he's like, hey, she single? No, he comes up to him and they're all there and he goes, oh, and who does she belong to? And then he answers, and then she said, so she's overhearing this. So do you think she's like, I wonder if he's interested in me? You know, there's all that stuff going on there, butterflies. And then it says, and she said, I pray you, let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and hath continued even from the morning until now, that she tarried a little in the house. All right, so, okay, it's the servant saying she asked them that, okay? So but she was there and she asked them this. She's asking them, can I have more than just this? Can I actually have a job where I work with you, that I get paid? So it sounds like she's asking, can I get out of just being poor? Can I actually go work and make some money? Do you see what's going on here? That's what it sounds like. So she's literally asking for a job. Now, verse 8. Then said Boaz unto Ruth. So was she there overhearing all this and he's telling it? Or did he go to her and start talking to her? But then he went to her and he said, hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens. So stay with the maidens, stay with the girls, separate the boys from the girls, right? And you stay with them. And then he tells her, now you can do this. So don't go to another field, but abide here fast by my maidens. So it's like he's saying, yeah, you can stay here. So what a thing to say. Now, that should have been it, right? If this is a business arrangement. But as you read into this looks like more than just a business arrangement. Now, I don't think he took off his ring and they went steady like in high school. But reading into this, it looks like he's like telling her, I kind of like you. Because look what happens next, verse 9. This almost sounds like jealousy. Let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. After what? The things that she's reaping. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. Now, if you're getting a job, the last thing the guy at the job says is, hey, don't talk to or date the other people you're working with. So do you see there's a little more going on here?
He didn't tell her that. He told them that.
He told them.
Keep your hands to yourself, and he wanted her to stay
Yeah.
with him under
He said,
his protective watch.
he's like, don't give me no lines and keep your hands to yourself, you know. So he's told them first. So that shows that before he was watching her. Kind of like King David was watching Bathsheba, you know, or something. But from afar he was watching, and he goes up to them and he goes, don't you mess with her. But he tells her, let thine eyes be on the field. So, wow. And so it's like he's saying, hey, don't you go looking at those other guys either. So you guys don't look at her. He's making his intentions known. And I guess if you were a prince, people would listen, right? So, long story short, it sounds like it's in high school all over again. It's crazy. But anyway, so let thine eyes be on the field that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee? And when thou art athirst, go into the vessels and drink of that which the young men have drawn. Now, verse 10, what does she do? Then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? And this shows her humility. She just literally gets down on her knees and bows down and just says, oh my, thank you so much. Now, do you do this to your business people you work for? God gives you a job, you just, oh, so thank you so much. You get down on your knees and say, oh, how can I have found grace in your eyes to give me a job? See, there's more than a business thing going on here. It sounds like she recognized him as a prince, and so she's like bowing before a prince. And she's like, oh, I'm so unworthy. So that shows her humility, right? But what happens? She says, I found what? Favor, or found grace. I found grace in thine eyes. We are saved by what? Grace. So remember, he's a type of salvation. We're saved by grace. Ephesians 2:8-9, for by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves is a gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So lots going on here. Now, she says, why are you showing grace on me? Because I'm a stranger. Now verse 11. This is kind of funny. And Boaz answered and said unto her, it hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto the people which thou knowest not. Here. So it's like, oh, I know everything about you. How did he learn all that?
People check.
I can just see him over here in the field saying to a couple of guys that were closer, come here. Tell me about this girl. What's her name? Where'd she come from? What's she doing? I mean, do you see that? Just like in high school, giggling. I don't know. But anyway, he definitely wanted to know more about her. Why? I think because she caught his eye. Does that make sense? So, yes, you're blushing already. You guys remember high school, don't you? And stuff like that. So anyway, lots of butterflies in the book of Ruth, if you will. And so you continue here, and he outright tells her, look, I know all about you. And she's got to be like, what? I'm nobody. How do you know everything about me? Now, this is a type of salvation. We're nobody. And we found grace in the eyes of the Lord, and he knows everything about us and still loves us. Boy, I tell you what, if I knew everything about you, I probably wouldn't love you. But Jesus does. He loves us. So he says, it hath fully been showed me all that thou hast done. So I know all about how kind you are. See, he's looking on the inside. He sees her inside, not just the outside. So maybe that's why he was interested in her, because he saw not only she was pretty, but on the inside, what a great woman. Because, wow, you want to help your mother-in-law and you're from 2 different countries? And wow. So anyway, it sounds like Ruth was an amazing woman. Almost like the woman at the well, right? That was wanting to help and brought water for the camels and things like that. So anyway, thy mother-in-law, the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, and are come into the people which thou knewest not heretofore. So now we get to verse 12. But look what it says here. Boaz confesses that he knows all about her. How did he know that? And lest he asks. So he asked about her and said, hey, tell me more about this woman. Now verse 12, he says, the Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. So he's literally saying, God bless you, and may you get a lot from the Lord for what you're doing. Now, we have that in the Bible in 2 John, verse 8, talking about when we get saved, we work for the Lord to get a full reward. What we do for Jesus, we get rewards for. Amen? And 1 Corinthians 3:8 is another verse there about the God will give you according to your labor, and under whose wings thou art come to trust. So it sounds like she rejected all her false gods. But if her daddy was that guy, right, was that king, he was a king. He would have had false idols everywhere. So she grew up Catholic. She grew up in that religion with idols images everywhere. And yet she said, I reject this, and I accept the God of Israel. So she's a good woman, and she's believing in the right God. And she's probably pretty. So Boaz is like, So this is a love story. Do you not see it? I do. Now, verse 13. And and by the way, the word, who thou art come to trust. I love that. You know why? How are we saved today? By faith or by trust. Let's go to Ephesians 1:13. Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 13. This is a great verse, Ephesians 1:13. We're not saved by our works. She was working, but that didn't save her. We're saved by faith. In Ephesians chapter 1 and verse 13 uses the word trust. Ephesians 1:13. And it says here in Ephesians 1:13, in whom ye also trusted. This is talking about salvation with Jesus. After that ye heard the word of truth, the gospel of your salvation, in whom also after that ye believed, ye were sealed with that Holy Spirit of promise. So guess what? We are saved by trusting in the blood atonement of Christ. So find that as a type there in the Old Testament. So anyway, she's trusting in the Lord. Now, verse 13. Then she said, let me find favor in thy sight, my Lord, for thou hast comforted me. Well, the Holy Spirit comforts us, right? And for thou hast spoken friendly unto thine handmaid, though I be not like unto one of thy handmaids. She points out very clearly, hey, I'm not one of you. I'm not like you. I'm somebody different. And how you could love somebody like me that's so different. Wow. Now, what else is going on here? She says, find favor. First, she says, how do I find grace with you? Why you have grace with me? Now she says, favor. And that reminds me of Proverbs 18:22. Because we know what happens, don't we? Ultimately, these two, they get married. Proverbs 18:22. What does Proverbs 18:22 say? Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing and obtaineth what? Favor of the Lord. So he's showing her favor, and God's looking down going, well, you don't know it yet, but I'm showing you favor. I just sent you like the greatest woman in the world. Now what you going to do with her? Isn't that wild? So what an amazing guy Boaz is. Sounds like he's a good dude. And what an amazing woman Ruth is. Sounds like she's a wonderful person. So now verse 14, we see he asks her out. Okay, here we go. So it says, well, look at it though. I don't think I'm stretching this. And Boaz said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither. He doesn't say, go to meal with me and go over there and eat. He says, come thou hither. Come with me and let's go out to eat. Hey, would you like to go get a cup of coffee sometime? How many people got married with that? Hey, you want to go to dinner? Hey, can I have your number so we can? Okay, so I don't think they had cell phones or anything, but he said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither. The word come says, it's like, come with me. Let's sit down and we'll talk at the table. So Boaz said unto her, at mealtime, come thou hither, and eat of the bread, and dip thy morsel in the vinegar. And she sat beside the reapers, and he reached her parched corn, and she did eat, and was sufficed, and left. So, when they went to dinner together, were they alone? This could get us into the discussion of dating and courting. And there's a difference there. And I'll get into that here in a second. But, yeah, they went out together, but with a chaperone. Now, in the old days, they did this, and I still believe you should do this. Dating is just two people getting together just to get to know each other. And oftentimes, what does that lead to? A one-night stand or something awful. The Bible said, I would the younger women marry, bear children, and guide the house. You don't just go out with someone and do bad things with them. Courting is this person and this person try to find out, are we the one that are for each other? And they have a chaperone with them. And so there's always above board. There's never a time when they're alone when they could do something because they would be tempted to do something. So there's a difference between courting and dating. I believe in courting. I believe if two people are thinking about getting married and they want to go out somewhere, you send a little brother along with them. You have a chaperone at all times. Does that make sense? So that's what's going on here. And so he is there, but with all the other people, and he shows favor to her and gives her some food, and then she just ups and leaves. Man, what a horrible... he's not going to ask her to pay the bill or anything, right? But she just leaves. I know, but what is she thinking? She's probably thinking, I got to go back to work and take something back to Naomi. So again, I can't find much fault in her. You know what I mean? But she just it almost seems like she's like, okay, bye. And just awkward, as they say. Anyway, and was sufficed and left. Now, verse 15. And when she was risen up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, let her glean even among the sheaves, and reproach her not. So, what does that bring us back to? She's not just over here with the poor. Let her go get some of this too. And you find that she's getting a lot more than what he gives just to the poor. Again, he's showing more favor on her. So he's just like, if she goes over there, let her go get some of that other stuff. Look, he's like, I don't know, he's giving her gifts, right? What do you do if you like somebody? You give them a gift. Okay. So it's all here in the Bible. So I'm not going to go so far as they're flirting with each other or whatever, but you can tell his intention is, I kind of like her. And she's kind of like, oh, whatever. I'm kind of on the fence. I just got to get some food. I'm hungry. And so she's an amazing lady is all I can say. So now we're down to verse 15, he says, and reproach her not. So let her go and get whatever she wants. Don't tell her, hey, no, you can't do that. So he's giving special permission to her to have more out of his field. And he told her, don't go to any other field, stay in my field. Okay? Now verse 16, and let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them that she may glean them and rebuke her not. So man, this guy's out there working. He's like, oh, I just want to get my work done. Now I got to show favor to her too. And every now and then just kind of forget some and just go over here and do some more so that she can go do it. You know, he's like, okay. But boy, that's got to be like a hassle for him. But that's what happened there. Now, the words handfuls of purpose are very, very famous words. A lot of our words that we use in the English language come from the King James Bible. And there is a hymn, an old hymn called Handfuls of Purpose. Have you ever heard this hymn? Have you heard it, Brother Ray? Handfuls of Purpose? All right. I'm not a good singer, but here we go. Tell me if this sounds like the book of Ruth. This is an old hymn that someone wrote. Looking o'er his field, he saw her as she gathered scattered grain. Just a Moabitish woman seeking solace from her pain. Be more than just a widow, Boaz gave command so kind. Let fall handfuls of purpose till I make this stranger mine. Handfuls of purpose, plotted efforts of grace. Handfuls of purpose brought me to his sweet embrace. When I could not find fulfillment, doomed forever to be lost, handfuls of purpose brought this seeker to the cross. You see how it's a type of salvation, is what they're saying. Just a poor and starving sinner, I gleaned all the world could hold. Grasping here and there a morsel, sought in vain to fill my soul. But my kinsman redeemer loved this stranger in the field. He dropped handfuls of gospel glory till his purpose was revealed. Handfuls of purpose, plotted efforts of grace. Handfuls of purpose brought me to his sweet embrace. When I could not find fulfillment, doomed forever to be lost, handfuls of purpose brought this seeker to the cross. How many of you heard that before? That's an old, beautiful hymn by someone that read the book of Ruth and saw, hey, he's a type of Christ. And how she came to him is how I came to Jesus. And it's just a beautiful song, how I came to Jesus. So, what an amazing thing that we see is going on here. And we kind of see the back and forth. And he likes her. We don't know if she likes him just yet. She probably doesn't even know who he is. And we'll see that as we move on. In chapter 3, it kind of like, oh, that's who it is. You know, so she's just kind of like, all right, this guy wants me to go work in his field, you know. Who is he? Oh, some guy, some prince in Israel is what it sounds like. But man, he's probably like, oh, can't sleep at night. Probably, you know, heart beating, he's like butterflies. I like her. Like, oh, I don't know. I wasn't going to say it, but I might as well say it. Like my stepmom said one time, sweet lady from Alabama. She said, them two's infatuated with each other. I think she meant infatuated, but she said infatuated. So they must have eaten some beans too or something. But anyway, they's infatuated.
Supposed to be a drop-dead good-looking guy.
Well, I'm sure if he's a prince, he's probably a cute fella. So, you know, maybe she's thinking he's cute. But he's saying, don't go look at the other men now, you know. So she's probably thinking, is this guy flirting with me? So anyway, so what we see here, where do we end there? In verse 15, and reproach her not. In verse 16 says, and let fall also some of the handfuls of purpose for her, and leave them, that she may glean them, and rebuke her not. So let her have a little bit extra. Now what does she do? Verse 17, so she gleaned in the field until even, and beat out that she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. So she not only goes and picks it, Then she goes and she beats it into flour to take the flour home to make bread. All right? And we've seen, Brother Mark, the bread that they make over there in Israel, because we went together. And so usually when we think of bread, we think of a loaf of bread in the Bible. You know that's not what it is. What they do is they make a big circle. It's called pita bread, right, nowadays. And it's really like a pizza almost. And they have round ovens, and then they put it in, and they just mash it up against the side, and it sticks, and then it cooks. So that's the kind of bread that they made back then, and then they'd peel it off and dip it and eat it. So she's a good woman because she's thinking about who? I got to get some food for Naomi too, because she's all I got right now. So an ephah of barley. So I looked up, and I hope this is right. You never know nowadays, but the internet said that an ephah is about 1.5 pounds or 0.7 kilograms. Now, when you go to the store and you buy flour, how much is the bag? It's not. Is it a 5-pound bag? So not even a 5-pound bag of flour. That's very little food, isn't it? So I don't know, but she did that, and she's taken that back. Now, verse 18, and she took it up and went into the city, and her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, and she brought forth and gave to her that she had reserved after she was sufficed. So she gave her to Naomi. So she takes it to Naomi. Yeah, you got to eat. She took it to her, thinking about her. Now, verse 19, and her mother, it's interesting, and she was sufficed. Twice it says that she was sufficed. She was sufficed by lunch with Boaz, and then she was sufficed here as well. All right, and her mother-in-law said unto her, where hast thou gleaned today, and where wroughtest thou? She's like, so what'd you do today? Where'd you go? And Naomi said unto her, okay, are you ready for this? Now, what is she really asking, if you want to kind of read between the lines? Verse 19, where hast thou gleaned today, and where wroughtest thou? She's asking, so did you meet anybody? Right? You know how women are. So did you meet any potential husband out there? Oh, she's bashful, so she's blushing. And just read between the lines. The people are real back then like they are today. Did you meet a potential new husband? So where hast thou gleaned today, and where wroughtest thou? Now, I don't think she just said, where hast thou gleaned today? She's like, so where did you go today? They're kind of like insinuating, so did you meet it? You know what I'm saying? You just kind of read between the lines sometimes. Wherefore wrougest thou, blessed be he that did take knowledge of thee. How did she know that someone took knowledge of her? One of these maidens probably saw what was happening, and she just kind of ran over to Naomi and said, hey, Naomi, and they gossip. You know how they, that's what it sounds like. Sure. So can you see all this happening behind the scenes and the gossip going on? Just like, anyway. So she answers. What does she say? And she showed her mother-in-law with whom she had wrought, and said, the man's name with whom I wrought today is Boaz. So she said, yeah, I went to this field, and this guy named Boaz, and she didn't fill in any more details. She didn't go, and he asked me out to lunch, and he gave me all this stuff. And she just so conveniently leaves that out for some reason. And Naomi said unto her daughter-in-law, blessed be he of the Lord. Who is the he? Boaz. So blessed be Boaz. Why? Because he's of the Lord. Who hath not left off his kindness to the living and to the dead. And Naomi said unto her, the man is near of kin unto us, one of our next kinsmen. So now, remember, Naomi said when she came into Israel, don't call me Naomi, call me Mara, bitter. She said, I'm just bitter, I'm mad at God. Now all of a sudden she's rejoicing. I guess she's not bitter anymore. I guess she finally got right with God, it sounds like. And now she's like, praise the Lord, guess what? Boaz is one of our kinsmen. So, quite interesting. Verse 21, and Ruth the Moabitess said, he said unto me also, thou shalt keep fast by my young men until they have ended all my harvest. That's found in verse 15. So she tells her that, and Naomi said unto Ruth, her daughter-in-law, it is good, my daughter, that thou go out with his maidens, that they meet thee not in any other field. So stick with him and his field and see where this goes. She stays with maidens, which we talked about in verse 8, under protection of men, verse 21. To do what? So they could watch her. So they could all watch each other. But Boaz wanted some more intel on this thing. He wants to know, is she a good woman? Or is she listening to me? Or is she looking at these other guys? So this whole thing is being put together, and God is showing us this, and it's pretty interesting. So it says in the end there, verse 23, so she kept fast by the maidens of Boaz to glean unto the end of barley harvest and of wheat harvest, and dwelt with her mother-in-law. So she was what? Obedient. She was obedient to her mother-in-law, so maybe she was obedient to her husband. Now, till the end of harvest. How long is the end of harvest? How long can it take to harvest a field? I don't know. Days? Weeks? I don't know. So he's watching her all this time. And the harvest is the type of what? The rapture. So that's what we're working in the field right now. And we're waiting for the harvest to end. Because we want to go see Boaz. So that's what the song was about. So that's the book of Ruth. Now, what is this all about? It's all about, ultimately, they get together and get married. And what do they find? Verse 1 of chapter 3. Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said unto her, My daughter, shall I not seek rest for thee, that it may be well with thee? Marriage is a rest. Did you know that? It's supposed to be. Now, some people have a problem, don't they? Like I said last week, the couple, the guy sleeps with a gun under his pillow and the wife sleeps in the same bed with a knife under her pillow, because it's not a rest for them. They're always sleeping with one eye open, looking at each other. But that's not, a godly marriage is a rest because both can trust in each other and enjoy each other. But right now is not the rest. We are not in chapter 4 yet, where they get together. We're in chapter 2, and there's a whole lot of what? Uncertainty. The worst thing in the world is uncertainty, not knowing what's going to happen next. It's so nice when you have your ducks in a row, so to speak, and everything's going the way it should be. But when it's uncertain, you're just like, oh. Yet guess who was working behind the scenes? Boaz. Boaz is a type of Christ. So in your life, when things aren't always going the way you want, and things are uncertain, and you're scared, and what are you doing? You're losing faith in God, because He's going to work it all out. Just remember that He's behind the scenes working for you. That should encourage you, right? So Boaz is working behind the scenes. Now, look at verse 18 of chapter 3. We'll do chapter 3 next week. Ruth 3:18 says, Then said she, Sit still, my daughter, until thou know how the matter will fall. For the man will not be in rest until he have finished the thing this day. There's something about men, they can't rest until they get something done. And so she did all she could. Now she had to wait on him to do the rest. Now, are you doing everything you can? Go do what you can, and then wait on God to do the rest. Like the old lady told me one time, in missionary in Honduras, she said, put feet to prayers. And I was like, what does that even mean? Well, you pray and you ask God to do this. But if you're just sitting there like a bump on a log waiting for it, no, you put feet to prayers. You say, God, this is what I want. Now you walk and you start toward that way of where you need to be, and He meets you halfway sometimes. Does that make sense? So, Boaz is a type of Christ working behind the scenes. And guess what? God was working on their behalf for both of them. God was looking out for this, what was a pagan woman from a nation full of pagans. And God was looking out for this prince. But isn't it beneath a prince to marry a commoner? But yet that's what's taking place here. But really, was she a commoner? If really that tradition is true, and she really was a king's daughter. So really there's, wow, that's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. So we might as well, let's go to Proverbs 31. Proverbs 31 is what's called the Proverbs 31 woman, a virtuous woman. And we find in the book of Ruth, chapter 3 and verse 11, she is called a virtuous woman. And we'll see that next week. But what is a virtuous woman to be like? Well, let's look at Proverbs chapter 31. And this will tie, hopefully, everything together. Because chapter 1 tells us, she said, I will make your gods my gods and your people my people. She says to Naomi, I want to say Noemi because in Spanish it's Noemi, but to Naomi. But now we know that she trusted the right God because Boaz said, you trust in the Lord. So, Proverbs 31:10, who can find a virtuous woman, for her price is far above rubies? The heart of her husband doth safely what? Trust in her, so that she have no need of spoil. So we see Boaz watching her to see, can I trust her? Because if I do marry her, I need to know I can trust her. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax and worketh willingly with her hands. Well, flax is different than barley, right, Laura? Well, it's kind of, well, anyway, flaxseed oil is good for you. That's all I know. She is like unto the merchant's ship. She bringeth her food from afar. Well, didn't Ruth do that? She brought food from afar to Naomi. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. We're going to find out that she raised up in the middle of the night. Ruth did. She considereth the field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hand she planteth a vineyard. She girdeth her loins with strength. That's what the name Boaz means, strength. I mean, is that an accident, or is like the Bible always... Anyway, I just found that too much of a coincidence. And strengtheneth her arms. She perceiveth that her merchandise is good, her candle goeth not out by night. She layeth her hands to the spindle, and her hands told the distaff. She stretcheth out her hand to the poor, yea, she stretcheth forth her hands to the needy. She's poor and needy, but she's helping Naomi that's poor and needy. I'm not saying this whole chapter is about Ruth, but this chapter is about a virtuous woman, and that's what Ruth is. And here we're seeing how she's just like what it says she's supposed to be here. And guess who wrote this? David, right? Or somebody like that? Which would have been, do you think maybe he was thinking about his great-great-great-great-grandmother or whatever when he wrote this? I don't know. Actually, it was Solomon, wasn't it? Solomon wrote Proverbs. So, anyway, she is not afraid of the snow for her. We had snow this week, didn't we? I'm not afraid of it, but I don't like it. She is not afraid of the snow for her household, for all her household are clothed with scarlet. Clothed with scarlet. Does that mean anything? Am I getting confused, or was it a scarlet thread that Rahab let down to let them out? Wasn't it? So there's your scarlet right there, and that ties us back to Rahab. She maketh herself coverings of tapestry. Her clothing is silk and purple. Well, who can afford silk and purple? Do you know purple is the color of royalty? And Ruth might have been royalty. So it's all tying together here. That's pretty interesting. And her husband is known in the gates when he sitteth among the elders of the land. Well, you think that's what he did as a prince, as one of the rulers there? Yeah. He maketh fine linen and selleth it, and delivereth girdles unto the merchant. There's your haberdashery for you English people. Okay. Strength and honor are her clothing. There's strength again. And she shall rejoice in time to come. She openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. She looketh well to the ways of her household, and eateth not the bread of idleness. Her children arise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praiseth her. Her children was King David, whose son would have written this. And, wow, that's just too much. Many daughters have done virtuously, but thou exceedeth them all. There was many maidens in the field, but she was the one that exceeded them all. Favor is deceitful and beauty is vain, but a woman that feareth the Lord shall be praised. Well, she feared the Lord. She trusted in him. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates. So there we find Ruth as a virtuous woman. So I looked up virtuous in the Bible. I mean, in the dictionary. And virtuous means morally good, acting in conformity to the moral law, practicing the moral duties and abstaining from vice. Being in conformity to the moral or divine law as a virtuous action, a virtuous life. Chaste, applied to a woman. So Ruth was faithful, and Ruth was willing. And what God is looking for from us is what a man looks for in a wife. Willingness and faithfulness. For more, see my book, Robert Breaker, What the Bible Says About Marriage Divorce. Oh, shameless plug right there, wasn't it? But it's got a lot of good information in here. And Ruth is a great example of what a woman is supposed to be. Amen? And what God wants from a woman. It is romantic, and we see their romance coming together. And so there was one more thing I wanted to say that I had in these notes in my Bible, and let's see if I can find those real quick, and I'll be done. I think it's Proverbs 29:25. Let's look at that, Proverbs 29:25. And so it's just fascinating to see how this thing plays out. And it's not different from how things play out nowadays, is it? Proverbs 29:25. The fear of man bringeth a snare, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord shall be safe. And Boaz trusted the Lord, but also Ruth was trusting in the Lord, and then God protected her and kept her safe. Do you think she was safe? He told those guys to watch her. I don't know if they walked her home or whatever, but she was protected during that time, and she was being watched. It sounds like that he was concerned about her safety. So let me make sure I got all that here. Boaz told her what to do before they were even married, and she was obedient to what he said. Here it is, Philippians 4:19. God shall supply all your need according to his riches and grace. So always trust in the Lord. A man is to provide and protect. A woman is to submit and support. And so we start to see that the reason these two got together, it seems like, was because, hey, she's the kind of woman that I need. And she's like, hey, that's the kind of guy I need. And they got together. And we'll see even more how the law ties into this. And how the fact that he was part of the family, the Old Testament law said that they had to raise seed. So it came from that, raising seed up to it. So there we are. Anybody have any questions or comments on Ruth chapter 2? I told you there's a lot in this book, right? I wasn't joking. Anybody want to say anything?
Was her status elevated when she married Naomi's son, though?
Was her status elevated when she married him? Well, no, he went to Moab, so it almost like it almost sounds like he renounced being one of the princes or something by going to Moab, because they would have been like, well, he rejected us and went over there. So maybe.
But Ruth married Naomi's son.
Right. Ruth married one of these two.
Yeah. So
But-
did not that elevate her status?
Well, if she was the daughter of a king and she goes and marries these two, I don't know, did that elevate her status or bring it down? Because it's these guys that were from the prince. He was just somewhere in the family, somewhere on. So I don't know.
Naomi, though, was from royalty, right?
Naomi would have been from a different
Okay.
something. So you could say maybe Elimelech might have been a prince of Israel too, but it never tells us that. So he was just one of the family. But was her status brought up when she married Boaz? Well, now she's a princess.
Well, yeah, I know that.
If he came from a line of princes.
And I thought, well,
So Princess Ruth, what a thing, huh? Anybody else? What an amazing book, what a romantic book. We see biblical flirting, right, in the book of Ruth. Oh, anyway, anybody else? You have something? It's romantic is the right word. Well, it's one of my favorite books in the Bible too, and I just wanted to do it justice. I hope I'm not going overboard, but there's a lot in this book. And I'll just say this real quick. Again, years ago, I was traveling around preaching in churches, and I met Brother Stan Vespi. And he had all these old tapes, you know, that you put in your car, cassette tapes. And he did all these different verse-by-verse teachings. And his on the book of Ruth was one of the greatest. And I just remember listening to that several times. And so I want to make sure I do as good a job as he did. And I said that on one of my videos, and he got in contact with me and sent me his book on it. So I got his book of Ruth. But I just want this book to go out there because there's a lot of practical stuff here, as well as prophecy, as well as history. And it's fascinating. Anybody else?
Just one thing that I wrote down is like how Ruth left her gods just like we were asked to leave our gods and follow our own God, Jesus Christ. So she actually fulfilled like a prophecy to an Acts. When Paul would say like turn away from your gods and follow this one true God.
Amen.
She also did that too. And she was like blessed because of it. And she
Right.
left everybody and everything that will follow that. And that's like the same thing in Acts. Paul was always saying if you want to be a Christian, you got to turn all your gods away and then follow the one true God. He didn't say keep your gods and keep Jesus. He said turn them away. And she didn't come up with her gods and with Jehovah. She literally didn't combine them. She also left everything.
Amen.
Followed a God she never knew before.
Exactly.
That was interesting how that correlates right with Acts.
That's really good. That's really, and you think about it, Israel would go into false worship and false gods, and they were told not to. And yet she was raised with false gods, but she's like, I don't want them. She wanted the right one. So what a thing that
Sometimes the Gentile knows better.
sometimes the Gentile does better than a Jew. Is the moral of that story. But what a fascinating thing. What a fascinating thing. And I don't know, maybe I should go into that too real quick, but the Jews accept somebody as a Jew if their mother's a Jew. Well, what do you do with Ruth? She wasn't a Jew. So in the Bible, it's always the man and his seed. So you're a Jew from the father's line, according to the Bible. So I don't know where they get that tradition of saying, well, if your mother's a Jew, then you're a Jew. I don't know where that comes from. Yes, sir, Mark.
Naomi was saying that that Boaz was a kinsman, so are they kind of related in some kind of way?
So somehow Elimelech was related to Boaz, somehow. And I've never figured that out. But there's another guy who the Bible never tells us his name. And Boaz has got to go to that other guy and say, you're closer than me. You have to redeem her. And he says, I can't redeem her. And so then Boaz says, okay, then I will. And they don't give you that name. So I wish they would tell you, is he the brother of him? Or is he a cousin? Or is he, it doesn't really explain it.
Somewhat related because wasn't tradition you didn't want to marry outside the Jewish community or something? So
Sure. And you weren't here last week, but last week we looked at the law says the brother is to raise seed to the other brother. But wasn't Elimelech Boaz's brother? We don't know. They might have been cousins. They might have been something else. But it is fascinating to see what happens. And we're going to see that Ruth could have done it the way that Tamar did. Almost sounds like that's what she was going for. But at the last minute, she's like, whatever you want. So she submitted and said, hey, whatever you want to do. So, wow. Amen. Book of Ruth. Amazing book. Can't wait till next week. Thank you for coming.